You know, I've never been the type to say I told you so to a group of people I don't know over a petty reason like a TV show or a movie being just as bad as I said it was. So I won't do that here. Instead, I'll just look at the upcoming mountain of videos saying the same thing I said 1 month ago and think, yeah, I'm that guy. Alright, fine. But you have to admit, I was one of the very few people saying this from the beginning. Now, before I get into why I was right about the show being a bad continuation, do me a favor and like and subscribe so that I can actually make some money next time I end up being right about something like this. Also, I'll give you the background for the show in case you aren't a nerd like me. Daredevil Born Again is a continuation to the original show. I say continuation because this show was originally meant to be a soft reboot.
But my instinct is, based on the name of the show, it's called Born Again, the fact that that Kevin talks about it as being a season 1 rather than a season 4, my feeling is this is a whole new deal.
Yet due to fan backlash, it was later changed to a Frankenstein season 4, causing a creative overhaul that clearly screwed the show over in more ways than one, making the creators bring back some of the original cast, key rewrites to the show, as well as multiple reshoots, replacing the ones they already did, and certain side characters become more in the background because of this. Now, if you watched any of my previous videos on the show, then you'll notice I never mentioned any of this. The reason I did that is because I didn't want to use that as an excuse as to why the show is a bad continuation. I get that this show had a shitty start and production, but I don't think it's good to use that as an excuse for bad behavior. All the creators had to do was either greenlit a season 4 or stand on business and continue to make the show a soft reboot. And I'll tell you this, the better option is a lot more surprising than you think. I guess I should also explain why I reviewed the series episode by episode instead of waiting at the finish line like everyone else. The reason I did that was because I wanted to see just how bad the show was based on a first reaction to each episode, from the perspective of a person who loved the original show and was worried of the bad writing epidemic that has infected the Marvel Disney Plus shows. And I gotta say, this show did not disappoint when it came to disappointing me. Alright, let's just get to my final review of the series. For this section, I want to focus on the good parts of the series and not the bad, because even though this show is a bad continuation, there are still good aspects about it, one of them being the action. While it is a downgrade compared to the realistic and dynamic action of the original, it was still pretty entertaining and definitely felt a lot more brutal than the original. I think Wilson and Vanessa's relationship was honestly the best part of the series. It felt exactly like the original show from head to toe, and I also love the characterization it does for both of these characters, especially Wilson Fisk, as it gave us more of his history, letting us see him as more than just an antagonist for this show, something that the original did in episode 8. Vanessa also gets the same treatment, but to a much lesser extent due to the problems I'll mention at this timestamp. Overall, this show did both of these characters a lot of justice, and then some. Another good aspect was the creative ideas this show brought up, such as BB Urich and the BB Report, as it was able to let us see the opinions of the people that live in New York dealing with this superhero nonsense on a daily basis. Introducing the elites of New York was pretty good too, as it could give you a different perspective on how New York is operated by people much richer than you, although it can get pretty stale if you do it wrong. Of course, the original cast is goated as always. And I won't lie here, the new cast has been doing pretty well too, all things considered. It's just a damn shame that the writing is equal to that of a CW show. Oh, and before I forget, let me just make one thing clear. This show may be decent, or even good on its own, but as a continuation, it's absolutely horrible. And I guess it's about time I explain why. Now for this section, I'm going to split it into two, and don't worry, I'll explain why later. There are several reasons as to why the show sucks as a continuation, some more valid than others. So let's just treat it like it's Dante's 9 circles to hell and start from the top, which is what I consider to be the lowest hanging fruit. And yes, that pun was intended. To start things off, the opening is mid. It's a massive downgrade from the original, using decent visuals mixed in with an epic version of the original opening soundtrack, and oddly enough, I think this opening is a perfect representation of why the show is a shitty continuation, as it removes the best qualities of the original while still trying to emulate it in one way or another. Of course, I'm only half kidding about this point, so you can take it with a grain of salt. What I'm not gonna take though is how the CGI looks. The original show didn't need CGI to look good, and I think its inclusion is downright useless. And I get that the original showrunner was gonna do it if he had the budget for it, but I mean, let's be real here. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, especially when we see the results of the two outcomes. The supersuit is also mid as well. 3C Films actually went into a whole conspiracy on how Marvel is reusing the same suits, but I think something else is at play. I am a firm believer that Marvel should go back to using classic costumes for their superheroes, however goofy they may look. Now of course they can modernize it and make it look good for the big screen, but they shouldn't end up like the Iron Spider suit and lose everything that made it good to begin with. Also put the logo on the freaking suit for f***'s sake. Alright, now let's get into the real meat of my criticism, starting with the one case of character inconsistency. In episode 3, Matt reveals Hector's secret identity in order to win the court case against him. I call this a character inconsistency controversy for two reasons. Number one, Matt knew just how dangerous Wilson Fisk is and how his secret identity getting out could hurt the people around him.
I'm going after him, Foggy. I'm gonna find a way to bring Fisk down. But I can only do that if I know that you and Karen are safe.
Dude, slow down. I'm still processing that you're, like, even sitting here right now.
I know you're gonna want to get involved. You and Karen try and fight Fisk in some way. I'm telling you, I need you to stay out of it and leave it to me.
No.
No.
No. You don't get to show up like this and say something like that and expect me to be cool with it. You're my best friend, asshole.
See, I was wrong to become your friend, Foggy. I put you in danger and it was selfish of me. Now, I can't change the past, but I can stop making the same mistake. We're done, buddy. It's over.
I will never stop hunting Karen Page or Foggy Nelson. I will tell the world who you really are.
And number two, earlier in this same episode, Matt made it very clear to both the judge and his opposition that Hector's identity should not be revealed.
The guy's a vigilante.
He wasn't in possession of his mystical amulet or in the White Tiger outfit at the time of the incident, allowing this type of totally inflammatory information will unfairly bias the jurors. It perfectly meets the standard of more prejudicial than probative.
Cut the crap. It speaks straight to the heart of the case. It suggests a pattern of behavior that drove Hector Ayala to kill Officer Shanahan on that subway platform.
The jury will be deliberating about the tragic events of a single evening. The proceedings must rest not on my client's clothing, but what happened on the platform that night. Look, I get it, I do. I get the instinct to allow everything but the kitchen sink in as evidence, but it's not right, and with respect, it's not what you're up there to do.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
I'm granting the motion in limine. The people are directed not to discuss or introduce any evidence of Hector Ayala's life as White Tiger or any acts of vigilantism.
This is some bull, Jerry.
Thank you, Your Honor.
This was an impulsive, illogical, and downright stupid decision by Matt, and it only happened because the writers wrote themselves into a corner and didn't know how to get themselves out of it. Of course, this goes to show just how poorly written this episode is, and let's just put a pin in that statement because we'll come back to it later, as I now want you to focus on the fact that episode 5 is literally a filler episode, and serves no purpose to the plot other than telling you that this show is a part of the MCU and helps further justify Matt returning to being Daredevil, both of which were already done and explained pretty well up to this point. I hate even having to talk about this episode because it literally felt like I just wasted my time once I got done watching it. Yeah, it had good characterization for Matt and the side characters, and the action was popping off too, but let's be real here. This entire episode could have just been replaced with maybe a couple of scenes here and there in either episode 6 or episode 7. And remember, this episode came after the one where they had set up the storyline for Muse in episode 4, which was later continued in episode 6. So yeah, it was practically a useless episode. Another big problem I had with this show was the fact that other than the two main characters, it used every single side character as a plot device, and yes, that includes them too. This show introduced a lot of characters that had a lot of potential to add interesting layers to the show, the biggest one being BB Urich. She had the chance to do what her uncle did in the original series, but better. We as the audience would have been able to see what it was like for BB Urich to be an aspiring reporter, covering any story you can, no matter how big or small, creating a show called the BB Report, where you take the opinions of any New York civilian, regardless of whether they make sense or not. She could let the audience see the events of the show occur from a different perspective. She could investigate any potential corruption that could happen with Mayor Fisk and his administration, as well as any activity done by a vigilante. She could help Matt be his eyes and ears in the public eye, helping him crack down on any false narrative that would arise, as well as help bring attention to the stories that matter, and finally, live up to the greatness that her uncle had set for her. Instead, we got some lazy ass scenes and shitty intermissions. I mean, seriously, all they did with her was less than the bare minimum. What's even worse is that she's the lucky one, as everyone else, whether it be Angela, Kim, Cherry, and McDuffie, are all just plot devices. No different than the Infinity Stones. They're only here to help the plot progress and nothing else. They lack the background and intrigue that the characters from the original show had. And while we're at it, this show did them dirty too. But let me save that for later because my blood pressure's starting to kill me. Now let me ask you something. Do you know what's worse than just using a character as a plot device and nothing more?
wrong.
It's actually wasting a character, putting them in the story and then completely writing them out when they could have done so much more for it. And remember that pin I gave you earlier? Well, you can take it out now because this is what I was referring to. Episode 2 and 3 is the White Tiger's storyline, and the way the writers decided to end it off was by shooting him. They killed off a character who had by far the most potential out of the entire cast of side characters, effectively wasting him. Oh, and get this, that same storyline they used him for is just a downgraded repeat of what we got in episode 1 for the original show. See, the thing is, this episode tries to do the same thing that episode 1 of the original show already did, making an innocent character be put on trial even though they didn't do the crime, but have that same innocent character not tell the full truth. And this plotline was done so much better in the original. For one, it had the air of suspense to it. We as the audience didn't know what led up to Karen holding that knife, and it was only after she told her story that we had a decent picture of it. But more than halfway through the episode, Matt figures out that Karen lied about one thing, that being she kept a file which got her in this mess to begin with, and he only figured this out because Foggy said this.
She may not be guilty, Matt, but that doesn't mean Miss Page is telling the truth.
Keep in mind, Matt knew she was innocent via her heartbeat, but was willing to admit that she could also be lying about a major detail, which leads me to 2. This story showed Matt's intelligence and strategic use of his powers, Foggy's discernment for innocent people and honest people, and Karen's recklessness for keeping the very file that got her framed and almost killed. And in case you didn't notice, none of this is in the second episode. The closest we get to this is the heartbeat scene where Matt figures out that Hector is innocent and lying about certain things. So out of all the pros I mentioned earlier for the original, only one of them actually applies to Born Again. The messed up part is, you know for a fact that I was right about Hector contributing more to the plot when you get to episode 4, where there's a side plot about a homeless guy getting constantly screwed over by the system. By the way, he's a repeat offender. Now granted, you can feel bad for the guy, but making him a martyr doesn't really click when he has had multiple chances to use the system to his advantage, as well as the horrible introduction they gave to him. I honestly don't know what the writers were thinking when they did that, but here's what I was thinking, or in this case saying, what the alternative would have been if they had just kept White Tiger alive. The writers wasted the character of Hector Ayala, using him for a repeated storyline that was really just a pale reflection of the original, and then committing the ultimate sin of not using him to the fullest extent, something that the original show would never have done. I rest my case. And I get that the actor died in real life, but if I'm being brutally honest here, I'm not letting IRL reasons excuse bad writing. Bad writing is bad writing regardless of circumstance. But now that I've talked your ear off about the side characters, let's get back to that one topic I mentioned earlier about the original cast, specifically where I said that the show did them dirty too. The reason I said this was because the writers mishandled the character departures for both Foggy and Karen, while keeping Bullseye in a state of limbo. Right off the bat, the show takes a massive leap, killing off one of the most pivotal characters for the original show and writing out the other one. I understand that this show is meant to be a soft reboot and not a season 4, but still, you dedicate one episode to Foggy's death and Karen's departure instead of letting Matt feel the weight of this action and trauma for 2 episodes, something that would have happened in the original show I might add, but I digress. The only 2 characters that didn't get this treatment were Frank and Vanessa, which basically means that if this were a test, then the writers would have gotten a 40%. And no, Matt doesn't count. I think the second worst part of all this though is how weak the payoffs are. The payoff in episode 3 sucks dick for obvious reasons. The payoff for episode 6 is only decent given the foundation it had, and episode 9 is in that same regard due to that storyline's foundation being somehow weaker. The payoffs given to you in this show feel almost as lackluster as the season finale, and it reminds me of the one time Santa actually gave me coal for Christmas. Although I think that the craziest part about this series is the fact that throughout this entire video, I was able to use clips from videos that I made weeks ago and they still hold up perfectly. I guess that just goes to show how good of a writer I am. Hell, maybe I'll just take this commenter up on his offer. Yeah, you're probably right. Well, since you brought it up, I might as well explain it now. I split the section into 2 because I wanted to state my problems with the show in those prior videos first, before I state my new issues with the show here. One of them being, where in the actual are these characters from seasons 1 through 3? I can understand that the team probably couldn't get all the actors from the original show and only got the most important ones. But let me be honest here, if you're going to make the show a continuation, you might as well make it feel like one instead of just some downgraded copycat. Also, I forgot to mention this and that last point in my actual review videos. And are we really going to ignore that the story for season 3 contradicts this show's entire premise? Like, the main point of season 3 was showing how Fisk uses his power and influence to corrupt certain agencies and individuals, and how with enough willpower, ingenuity, and drive, that same corruption can be beaten. Not through killing, but with the law.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
I don't want to leave you, but I can't ask you to be accomplices to what I have to do now.
What does that mean?
It means that Matt's gonna kill Fisk.
That building falling on you really did mess up your head.
We put him in prison, Foggy. Look what happened.
It's not gonna be the same this time. They're gonna throw him in some supermax hole where he can't compromise anybody.
I know you're not that naive.
It's called having faith in the system. Something you used to have.
It's called facing the reality that some people are so rich and powerful, the system simply can't handle them. But they actually are above the law.
That's the bullshit that people like Fisk want you to believe. Nobody's above the law. The only thing powerful enough to take down scumbags like him is the law.
And now you want to tell me that the same man who got convicted with no hope of getting out this time ends up not only doing just that, but running for mayor and getting elected? Shut up with that political nonsense. I am sick and tired of hearing this shitty talking point. Just because our current president may be a convicted felon doesn't mean that Wilson Fisk can be one too. Especially given how public his conviction was, and how it was made very clear that Matt had his thumb over Wilson Fisk by the end of the season with their deal. Also, are you not gonna mention that the same convicted felon you mocked earlier is supported by half the country? I'm talking about the votes he got during the election against someone who was apparently overqualified. Alright, enough politics. Both of you get out of my video. Since I covered all the points I wanted to say, let me leave you with this final statement here. Upon rewatching the show and the original, I have come to the conclusion that this show was better off being a soft reboot, as it wouldn't have had to deal with the history of the original show, and at most, could only take inspiration from it. Funnily enough, if this show had been a soft reboot, only 2 of these criticisms would have actually had the chance of sticking, given that the creative overhaul only happened because one of the higher ups decided not to stand on business, which in all honesty is kinda sad when you think about it. This show could have been great, maybe not in the same tier as the original, but it could have been damn near close. But due to bad decision making, poor planning, bad writing, and bad writing, this show will unfortunately never live up to the hype the fans have for it. And I plan on counting out season 2 right now, because that season will have to be built on this one's problems, whether it likes it or not. You know, this feels kinda cathartic in a way. For weeks, I've been reviewing the show, stating its good points, its bad points, and why I think the latter outweighs the former. And while I've been putting up with the 2 whole hate comments since my first video, defending this show from absolute dog shit criticism, less than 500 subs to my name, and doing 5 different classes at the same time, after all of that, I've been vindicated. Proven right that my opinion was in fact correct, and that these 2 comments have aged up like milk. So in honor of that realization, I'm just gonna fucking say it. I told you so! Real quick, if y'all enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe so I can flex on the hoes and the haters. Also, follow my socials so that you'll know when I post a new video. And if you really enjoy my content, then consider checking out my Patreon, where I give weekly behind the scene updates, as well as an archive for all my videos. You can also get your name featured on the end credits, as well as early access to the first 2 minutes of all my videos, which also include this one. Oh, and before I forget, you also get access to exclusive videos that are going to be Patreon only. Think of it like the last episode for SpongeBob if it was behind a paywall. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.